Welcome to my 214th video on my work with O gauge. This part will be a fairly short one, featuring a couple of different prongs of approach to improving the running of things on my Hornby Dublo 3-rail tabletop railway. On the one hand, trying to fix problems with the track work, and on the other hand, tweaking a loco model to help it run better. In this case, the track work fix will involve replacing a point that has been identified as repeatedly causing problems, and which really couldn't be fixed in place, and the loco tweak will involve adding some weight to the plastic body of the Hornby Jinty tank loco that I converted for 3-rail running to help it stay on the rails more reliably. This is the point that I added at the back right of my original tabletop setup to allow for branching off to the line on the added shelf going to the turntable. This point has been a constant problem since I added it, persistently derailing locos, wagons, and coaches. I did what I could with it in place, bending the rails to get them to align better, grinding down the ends of the centre rail pieces to provide for more even transition, etc. But still, quite violent derailments were sometimes happening. Looking closely at the point, I realized that the ends of the switching blades were sticking up considerably higher than the side and centre rails. This seemed to be the main remaining problem with the point. The sticking up end of the blade was hitting parts on the underside of rolling stock, or hitting the wheel of the rolling stock as it tried to go along the rail, causing rocking and potential derailment, and sometimes stopping motion completely. I don't know whether you can really see here, but I've laid a steel ruler across the outer rails and then pressed it up against the end of the blade, and the blade is more than 1 millimeter above the level of the ruler. Here's more of a close-up, hopefully making it clearer how the ends of the blades are sticking up. This is a real problem. At best, it's going to cause rolling stock to rock or bounce as it goes over the point, especially when passing from left to right as seen here, and so striking the raised ends of the blades head-on. There didn't seem to be much that I could do to correct this with the point in place. Because of the way the blades are mounted on the sliding piece from the operating lever, it really wasn't possible to bend the ends of the blades downwards. I could have tried to file or grind down the tops of the blades, I suppose, but I decided that the prospect didn't look too good that way, and that it was time to bite the bullet and just replace this point. Actually, since problems had been apparent for quite a while, I'd already been thinking of replacement, and since the only other right-hand isolating points that I had on hand were ones that I'd removed previously because of problems, I'd gone ahead and bought another lot of 3-rail isolating points on eBay. Those had now arrived, so it seemed that it was time to proceed with replacement. Unfortunately, it's quite a faff replacing track sections when you've already got everything screwed down, and points are basically the hardest to replace, being connected to 3 other track sections. I started by removing the fixing screws from the point itself and from the neighbouring track sections. I also removed the adjacent signals and advertising sign out of the way to make access to the work easier. I managed to disconnect and remove the offending point, quite tricky given that only limited movement of the adjacent track sections was possible, as they were still connected at their other end to sections that were still screwed down. Here's the removed point on the bench. Perhaps this makes it clearer how the ends of the switching blades were sticking up. With my latest eBay order in hand, I now had 5 more right-hand isolating points that were new to me. None of them were actually new, they were all used items, and their condition varied somewhat. The first thing that I'd done when I unpacked them was to adjust all of them so that they would lie flat without any tendency to rock on a flat surface. Dublo 3-rail track sections have a tendency to get twisted so that they're not flat, and when they're placed on a flat surface, pressing down on one part of the track section causes other parts to rise. They won't work well on a layout if they're connected in that state. They need to be adjusted so that they lie flat and pressure anywhere on the section does not cause rocking. This can be done simply by gently bending the section in your hands until you get the adjustment right. Naturally, this is a bit fiddly and requires patience, but it's worth taking the time to do it right. As I say, I'd already adjusted all of these points in that way, but I hadn't done anything else to them yet. Looking closely at all 5 of these points, some of them had the ends of their switching blades slightly above the level of the main rails, and some of them had the ends of the blades slightly below the main rails. None of them were anywhere near as bad as the point I removed. Perfect alignment in height between the ends of the blades and the side rails is really the ideal, but in this case I figured that it would be better to have the ends of the blades slightly below the side rails than to have them above, and so I selected one of these points to use as the replacement on that basis, the one at extreme right here, whose blades were slightly on the low side. I cleaned the operating contacts underneath the point with electrical contact cleaner. The sliding contacts on this point seem to be quite well adjusted and to be working properly. This is not always the case, and sometimes the contact tab will need to be adjusted to provide for proper connection and isolation. I cleaned the tops of the rails with fine emery paper on a wood block and then with contact cleaner on a rag. I also cleaned the end connecting tabs and the fish plates and checked them for proper alignment, etc. This point seemed to be generally in pretty good shape. To be sure, I checked for proper continuity and isolation with a multimeter before trying to install the point. Everything checked out okay. I connected the replacement point up with the existing track sections, again a bit of a contortionist act given the limited range of motion of the adjacent sections. Then I refitted the screws holding down the track sections. This gets to be a bit problematical as the screws are only going into foam tiles in my case, and they'll tend to lose grip if taken out and put back in repeatedly. I have ordered some slightly larger screws with the idea of using those if the original screws don't seem to be gripping well anymore. I put back the signals and the advertising sign around the area where the point had been refitted. And then I tested with a loco, running over the point in every possible direction, clockwise, anti-clockwise, branching off and not branching. I used the Jinty that I'd converted for 3-rail running by fitting a Marklin skate pickup for the centre rail, as this model had perhaps the worst problems navigating the old point in this location. The Jinty was able to get over the new point in every possible direction without showing any signs of wobbling or jamming, so that was a promising sign. A minor digression here. I'd put this little metal bicycle stand and these 2 metal bicycles beside my station. They came to me in a lot of scenic odds and ends that I bought on eBay. They were irritating the heck out of me since it was very difficult to actually get the bicycles to stand up in the stand, and when they were stood up in the stand beside the station, any little knock on the tabletop would cause them to fall over. So I gave up and glued the bicycles into the stand with CA glue. And here they are back beside the station. Now they should stay like that, and I won't be fiddling around every day trying to get them to stand up. The 3-rail converted Jinty now wasn't running too badly, but it was still a little bit unreliable going over points. It tended to lose electrical contact as it went over points. Getting the skate pickup well adjusted could help somewhat with this, but if the skate pickup had too much downward spring pressure, this meant that the wheels weren't pressed securely down onto the rails, and so they sometimes didn't stay on the rails properly through the points. I figured the best way to help remedy these problems would be to make the model heavier, and I hoped that this could be done by adding some weight inside the plastic body. Here I've removed the body from the chassis, which is done simply by gently pressing in the single plastic spring clip at the back and then lifting the chassis out of the back of the body. There are 2 plastic hooks at the front of the chassis that fit into holes in the front of the body. Here you can see the body upside down beside the chassis, both facing in the same direction, that is, the front of both is at the right. I thought that it should be possible to add some wheel weights into the body without interfering with any of the moving parts or electrical connections. There was a space behind the cab at the back of the body where quite a large weight might be fitted, something like these half-ounce wheel weights at left here. I separated one of the half-ounce wheel weights. They have self-adhesive backing from which you just peel off the covering paper. I manoeuvred the weight in behind the cab and stuck it to the back of the plastic cab insert. There wasn't room for one of the half-ounce weights at the front. I did think of using lead tape there, but then I thought that a quarter-ounce wheel weight might fit okay. I was able to stick a quarter-ounce wheel weight into the top of the front of the body. I wasn't entirely sure, but I hoped that the weight would be high enough to not interfere with the front of the motor and the worm gearing. I put the body back on, and I was pleased to find that the model still operated okay with the new weights in place. So now I'll finish with a little running video of the adjusted Jinty on the adjusted track. Okay, let me see if I can see what I can do with the Jinty. Now I've added, 3/4 of an ounce of weight to the body to weigh it down just a little bit more. It was actually running without the weight, but I thought the weight might help it. Perhaps more significantly, I replaced that point, which was, it just really couldn't navigate the old point there. That point was giving problems for a lot of things, so I've replaced that point there, and we hope that won't cause a problem now. Oh, and there's those bicycles that I finally glued to their stand because I got fed up with them falling down every 5 minutes. Okay, let me see how the Jinty goes. That point's a bit iffy, not so much that it derails, but he has some trouble getting over it. He actually seems to need more power now I've added the weight to him. I guess maybe just because, I don't know, you're moving more weight. I think he needs more power. I mean, I'm running him at about 60–70%, and I'm actually giving him 100% over that point just to try and throw him over that point at the left end there, because he tends to stop on it. He doesn't so much derail on it, but he tends to stop on it. So I'm giving him, I've cleaned it as best as I can, and then I'm giving him, I'm actually not looking at the power controller now, I'm just controlling it by feeling my left hand, but okay, well, I mean, he certainly runs. You do sometimes see a spark as he goes over that point in that replaced point at the back there, so there's obviously a bit of short-circuiting taking place there, but it's only very brief, so hopefully it's not enough to annoy the controller. Okay, let's be optimistic and see if we can get the Jinty to go round with a little train of 2 LMS Suburban coaches. So this would be a little Suburban train. Let's try. I'm going a little fast here. Ooh, something sounded weird there. I don't know what that was. It fell over or something. I don't know what that noise was. Have to go kind of fast to get over that point, but then we can slow down along the straight track at the back there, probably. See if we can get around once more. I kind of have to boost the power there because he has a nasty tendency to stop. Oops. Maybe we'll just stop him round there. So, well, between one thing and another, I think it was worthwhile replacing that point, and I think I have persuaded the Jinty to run a little bit better now.